Lauma is the brand new character coming to Genshin Impact for the second half of version 6.0, and she is going to be our first dedicated Bloom support since all the way back in 3.x with Baiju. So in this video, we're going to go through her whole kit and talk about it in simple terms that one can actually understand, as well as go through some really unique interactions about her artifact sets that really open up her team building that could potentially make her a very interesting and worthwhile pull. Welcome to Jello Impact, where we build and test every single character to help you decide who you want to wish for and build. The version 5.8 banners featuring Citlali and Anefa are here. If you're planning on spending on these or any future banners, let me recommend Loot Bar. I have been personally using Loot Bar for all of my top-ups for over a year, and I have spent thousands of dollars on my account. They are 100% safe, using currency exchange to get you discounts on the crystals that you were going to buy anyways. They have tens of thousands of 5-star reviews and excellent customer service. And right now you can get the limited edition discount pack for an even bigger discount than normal to celebrate the launch of these banners. It is extremely easy to use. Just click the pack that you want, enter your UID as well as your region, press top up now, and you'll get your Genesis crystals in just a couple seconds. Officially minutes, but that only took a couple seconds. With lootbar.gg, you get up to 25% off, and if you join VIP, you get loads of free coupons, so you can save even more. New users will also be able to get a further 10% discount from clicking my link in the description, as well as an exclusive offer just for this channel with a $2 welcome. It is partnerships like these that will allow me to continue bringing the content that I do to you, as well as support my family of 5. And as I said, I've been using them unsponsored for over a year for all of my purchases. So whether you're buying for Genshin or for any other Hoyo games, make sure to click my link to support the channel and your wallet. Thanks again to Loot Bar for sponsoring the video. I will say she has by far one of the most interesting kits that I've seen in a while, in the sense that she will open up a lot of new team options or revive a lot of old team options that we just haven't had in a really long time. But before we can get into that, we really need to talk about her kit itself. She is, of course, a Dendro Catalyst user, and as such, her normal attacks are Dendro infused, but you probably won't be using her on field too much for reasons I'll talk about later. But it does seem like an option that Genshin wants to provide to you. I don't know how good it will actually be, but she does have some mechanics that may suggest they want to give some kind of option to use her on field, but I'll tell you about it. She has a charge attack that is mostly her exploration passive. If you remember the video, Llama seemed to be able to transform into this deer, and it runs around the area and you can see it running around. This appears to be activated through Llama's charge attack. If we look at her kit, that seems like what it's going to do. It is going to consume stamina, which unfortunately is not as good as the exploration mechanics that don't use stamina, and you can recharge stamina while you're doing it, such as Yelan's or even Skirks. It's going to be more like Arlecchino's, which actually takes your stamina as you go, which is not as ideal, but she will be able to run as well as jump twice, which is interesting. This charge attack, after you use it, also hits in AoE, and she also gains interruption resistance. So that tells me that they have some sort of idea for her to be an on-fielder, which is kind of weird because basically nothing else about her kit, except for one other thing, makes you want to use her on field, but it might be like a cope option that you can do if you really like her design. I mean, I'll be definitely trying it because have you seen her? We'll definitely try it. I'm going to explain her passives first. Normally I do skill and burst first, but if you don't understand her passives, her skill and burst become quite complicated to understand. Basically, the main thing she does is convert all blooms on the team to lunar blooms. This is Hyper Bloom, this is Burgeon, this is Nilou Bloom, this is regular bloom, all of it. Lunar Bloom can crit at a base of 15% only and 100% crit damage, so 15 crit rate, 100 crit damage. If you have another Nodcry character on the team, this is 25 and 120. Additionally, Lunar Bloom also creates a dewdrop that can be consumed for additional effects that we'll talk about later. She has a passive that also reduces her charge attack cooldown based on the elemental mastery she has. So that could just be for exploration, or again, it could be hinting at they want you to use this on field somehow. We don't know what it looks like. We don't know the animation, so I don't really know if that's going to be any good or not. And we don't know the multipliers. So there's stuff we don't know, but it's interesting nonetheless. For her elemental skill, if you tap, it does AoE Dendro damage. You're really never going to want to just use the tap version. If you hold, she summons a field that follows you. It deals AoE Dendro damage every 2 seconds, which is very infrequent Dendro app, highlighting that you'll probably will always want to use a second Dendro with her. She does need at least one dewdrop, which you'll remember dewdrops are created when you create a lunar bloom, and any bloom on across your whole team does this. So she doesn't have to create the bloom herself. Anyone on the team is fine. This holds skill, so it's a field that follows you around. It deals Dendro damage every 2 seconds, and it reduces Dendro and Hydro res for 10 seconds, which is very good. That's going to help your off-field Hydro character do damage and your on-field Dendro character, which is usually what it's going to be on this team, or an on-field Hydro as well. This right here makes her a much more complete buffer than just a bloom support. This means that actually building damage on your characters is going to be valuable. It also means that you're most likely going to favor not running electro carries like Clorinde or of course Flynn's, although they'll probably be good. It's probably going to strongly incentivize either Hydro or Dendro DPSs, which is likely going to be Columbina and Nefer in the future, is my guess. We'll talk about that later. She does extra damage from EM through the passive, so EM scaling. Her burst. So if Lauma consumed dewdrops, which again you get when you create lunar blooms, she gives a boost similar to Shenhe quills for up to 18 lunar blooms based on her EM. So you consume 3 dewdrops, you get 18 lunar bloom boosts. They're like quills that explode. The way they did it is not griefed and AoE. If it hits multiple, it only counts as 1. So that's really good, unlike Shenhe. So she's not total trash in AoE, and 18 is a lot more quills than Shenhe has, but this does mean that if you're just blooming all over the place, not like that, then it will only boost up to 18 times. I haven't looked at all of her constellations because I don't really cover whale stuff usually on this channel. Maybe in later videos we'll cover more of the constellations, but if there's lots and lots of blooms, it'll be this burst will be less valuable, but it's probably going to buff them fairly significantly, and 18 is still quite a few. So yeah, basically you kind of think of her like Shenhe, but kind of just better, like an updated Dendro Shenhe for blooms. And again, this works for Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, Nilou Bloom, everything. Some additional notes. Her Constellation 1 heals. I don't exactly know by how much. I don't know if that's going to be like a crazy team-wide healing, or if it's just minor healing. I'll have to wait and see a little bit longer. Other thing is I do think that most teams she's going to have, you'll usually be running some form of defensive utility. So there are certain teams that this might make or break, but the majority of teams you're usually going to be running some other defensive utility anyway, so it's not the biggest deal. And then Nahida's C2 has been buffed to include Lunar Bloom. So Nahida's C2 buffs by 10% crit rate and 20% crit damage. So that will bring your total to 35,130. I did talk about the on-field and off-field artifact sets in my Flynn's video, but something I did not talk about is that you don't actually need the on-field set to be held by a Nodcry unit as long as you have 2 Nodcry units on your team, which is honestly huge for her team building. When I finally realized this, that opened things up so much because it was really hard to try and figure out how to use this artifact set with a Nodcry character on field. It was feeling very incomplete team building in that way. But because this set can be used if you have Llama off field and then another Nodcry unit off field, this set will end up being a massive buff for on-fielders such as Alhaitham, Clorinde, Nahida if you want to use her on-field, and whatever on-fielder you're using, Sino, it's going to be really, really big. If you want a long breakdown of these artifact sets, I went over them much more in depth in the Flynn's video, but basically it gives 45% crit rate and 20% lunar reaction damage to 45% to the on-fielder and 20% lunar reaction damage team-wide. And then the off-field set gives 180 EM to the whole team and 20% lunar reaction damage. All of this assuming you have 2 Nodcry characters on the team. Basically everything about Nodcry makes it so you have to have 2 Nodcry units on your team, but they can be on-field or off-field. So here is where it starts getting really interesting with all the different team options. I think using Flynn's on the team is going to work. So you're going to have him on-field, Llama off-field, a second Dendro, probably ideally Nahida, and then of course you'll need a Hydro, so that could be Yelan, Farina maybe if you have C1 Lauma for healing, the free-to-play character Ino, who I'll make another video on her, but basically what you need to know for now is that she isn't Nodcry character that provides off-field hydro application. So something like this, or you can use Xingqiu or whatever hydro character. You're still going to be getting Electro Charge, you're going to be getting blooms, he's going to be triggering Hyper Blooms, he's going to have lots of EM because of how kits work. This should do really well. The only downside to this team is that Lauma's not doing any sort of resistance shred for electro damage. It could still end up being one of his best teams, but we don't know what the numbers are going to be like, but it's definitely not perfect synergistic unless because she doesn't reduce electro res. For Nilou, the main thing that I can see working is going to be mostly on fielding your Llama, maybe taking advantage of that AoE Dendro that she has with her charge attack. You're going to have Aino as your second Nodcry unit, and either Baizhu or Yao Yao. Baizhu for better kind of off-field healing, where you can on-field Llama more. And one thing to consider is that Llama C1 does heal, so if that allows us to replace Baizhu and Yao Yao with a better Dendro, such as Nahida, that could be really big. It could be they're really trying to bait Nilou wanters into getting C1 Llama, because Baizhu and Yaya don't really do anything except for provide poor Dendro app and heal. So being able to do that with Llama would be extremely valuable. So one could call that a scummy move on Hoyo's part. I don't know. It depends how it all shakes down when we get numbers. I'll make my final call as to whether I think that's greedy, scummy, or not. Because if it's broken at a baseline, then maybe it's fine, but we'll have to see. Next, how does she buff old Hyper Bloom? So putting Llama and Aino on the team with Alhaitham is going to be huge. You can see that Aino is going to be tied at the hip to Lauma until we get, in my opinion, Columbina, in which case Columbina will fully replace Aino, in my opinion, as the predictors are saying that successfully predicted almost everything here, with Lynn's being in 1.0, Lauma being a Bloom support in 6.1. They predicted both of those things. They've predicted Columbina to be an off-field hydro applicator, plus a bunch of other stuff. So Aino is definitely getting kicked out of these teams as soon as we get Columbina, and you're going to get a major power spike with Columbina when she comes out. But for now, it's going to be Aino. So this is what I was talking about with the artifact sets earlier. Lauma and Aino being off-field Dendro characters. I don't think that this off-field set can stack. If it can, that's nuts. But even if it can't, and they're using whatever other artifact set, Aino probably using Deepwood Memories and Llama using the other artifact set, Alhaitham is able to use this set, getting 45% crit rate, 80 EM, and buffing lunar reaction damage, in this case lunar hyper bloom. Flowers of Paradise Lost is getting a boost for Kuki, and it could be that Innefa is actually the most premium option for this slot, but I think Kuki will do just fine. So yeah, I can see this being really, really good. If you want to be using Llama with Nahida instead, you can easily swap out Alhaitham for Nahida here, and Nahida can be on field. You can be running her with crit and build damage for your Nahida. It's not something traditionally done, but I think it should be pretty solid on this team. I don't think you'll want to do on-field Llama because she'll want to build EM instead of crit based on her kit, but you never know. Next, I do think Clorinde is going to be solid. Similar to Flynn's, she's not going to get that Dendro res or the Electro res like Alhaitham will. So I expect the Alhaitham team to actually be as good or better than the Clorinde team. Right now, Clorinde is better in Quick Bloom than Alhaitham is, and it's not Clorinde's best team. So Alhaitham definitely needs the buff more than Clorinde. So I think this is good design. I think it would have been a shame for Alhaitham to be worse than Clorinde here. But nevertheless, if you want a new team for your Clorinde, you can get away with something pretty fun. And that should be a sustainless team, because Clorinde does self-heal, and you have two Catalyst users. One of them can hold Thrilling Tales, one of them can hold Prototype Amber to heal incidental chip damage. And so having off-field Aino, off-field Lauma, off-field Nahida, this should be pretty good, even though it doesn't res down for Electro. It should be quite a bit better than Clorinde's other Quick Bloom teams. I doubt it'll be a best in slot, but it should be a great option if that's what the Abyss or Stygian Onslaught favors. Nahida will buff Clorinde's EM, Lauma is buffing Clorinde's EM, and of course I focused mostly on Clorinde for this. So you might be wondering, what about other Electro DPSs? And I think they could work, but it might be a bit worse. And that's once again because of the healing. I think Clorinde with her self-healing might allow you to get away without using a healer and just using Prototype Amber Nahida or Prototype Amber Lauma, maybe both, but probably one or the other as the incidental chip damage healers for your supports, and Clorinde can self-heal. But if you're trying to use someone like Sino, now you're really losing a lot of defensive utility. And so this pretty much forces you to go for C1 Lauma, unless you want to replace Nahida with Baiju. And that's the same kind of thing with other characters. Cyno is especially fragile, but other electro carries that you might want to use, whether it be Sethos, Keqing, Yoimiya, or whatever other electro carries we're going to have, Varesa, because they don't have the self-healing, you're either going to need that healer or you're going to need Llama C1. At least that's what I'm guessing. And then of course, there's also the option that you don't use Llama with Ino, or you don't have to, and you can do Llama with Inefa instead. Inefa will be probably the best Hyper Bloom or Lunar Bloom trigger, although it's not as important, I think, to trigger Lunar Bloom with a character that builds crit. It's just that Inefa will do a lot of damage. So Inefa, you know, like I said, with Yelan on field or with Neuvillette on field, but also the Alhaitham version, it means you can get away with running someone like Yelan instead of having to run Ino. But it could be that Ino is actually quite good. Anyways, Inefa is also an option for that second Nod Cry slot. Oh, the other thing I wanted to add that I forgot, Llama's weapon is crazy as well. I talked about Flynn's. I think the weapon power creep in Nod Cry is going to be crazy. That could be a video in and of itself. But yeah, I think this Clorinde team looks very, very interesting. And then again, even better when Columbina comes out. Neuvillette is, of course, getting another buff, because of course he is. I think Inefa, Lauma, and Nahida should be the best way to do this. You don't really want another Hydro, and you do really want an Electro, but you still need 2 Nod Cry units to make things go as smooth as possible. And I think you're going to have to go double Dendro, because I don't think Lauma creates enough off-field Dendro to make this worth it. So C1 Neuvillette will definitely help his damage here. This is definitely much more of a Neuvillette driver team. Depending on how strong Llama ends up being, it could be his best team. It might be a side grade. We just don't know the numbers just yet, but it will be a team that will work. Similarly, you can use on-field Yelan. Yelan would be more suited to single target, so which is good for Hyper Bloom. It could end up being more single target damage than the Neuvillette version. I don't know about that. It'll be a lot of damage regardless. I don't know what'll be more. No, Neuvillette should be more, right? Surely. That being said, Neuvillette currently has a good artifact set, although this will probably be better on him. But Yelan doesn't have like as good of an on-field artifact set. Like I think, well, no, she can use Marechaussee too, but it doesn't buff her burst damage the same way. So this should be a bigger artifact set jump for Yelan than Neuvillette. They might do similar damage. Neuvillette should still be more. I don't know. We'll see calcs in a little bit. I was mostly considering Hyper Bloom for all of this, but Burgeon should work too. Replacing Kuki on that Alhaitham team with Toma could be something that you can do, but as per usual with Burgeon, you're dealing self-damage and you only have the shielding for defensive utility. This is another potential use case for C1 Llama. I don't see Burgeon being that much, well, maybe if AoE becomes favored again, Burgeon might start seeing relevance once again. And again, you can run on-field Nahida over Alhaitham for Burgeon. Burgeon should be buffed as well overall because Ino's Hydro application is AoE. So that's quite interesting. And then I was considering something Kniche Burgeon as well. This lacks a healer. So I don't know. I don't know if Kniche Burgeon is going to work out. It might be another C1 Llama situation. So I think overall, like the regular teams like Hyper Bloom, and that's like the main one you're probably going to play, doesn't really lose out on too much from having Llama as a healer, but the more slightly niche stuff like Burgeon that doesn't have as much dedicated support, and maybe the Nilou stuff might be more difficult to play without a healer, but again, we'll have to wait and see. It's mostly just because we don't have like an off-field or really any kind of pyro healer that provides like off-field pyro application. So yeah. And then of course I do expect Columbina, as I said, to be a big upgrade to these teams. And then naturally Nefer is supposed to be, according to the predictions, be the on-field Bloom characters. So the premium team, maybe it's this with Inefa, Lauma, Columbina, Nefer. That's obviously crazy expensive. It's what I predicted back from the beginning. I think it's far from necessary to need all 4 pieces of this team. But if I were to look into the future and guess what's going to be the best, I think this is what I would guess. Overall, I think that the healing behind Lauma being C1 could be considered scummy. But I think that her ability to pair really well with Ino as a free unit, and then in the future pair really well with Columbina, and just make up a core that's going to be very universal and very flexible, I think it's enough that I'm fine with the healing being locked behind C1. But of course, it's always sad to see, you know, a little bit of pay to win bullshit, but it's going to happen. That's just kind of how it goes. as long as it isn't too egregious. So it's always about finding that line, and we'll see when we get the whole kit whether it draws the line or whether it goes over it. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe if you're excited to see the I know video, and if you don't want to do that, that is totally fine. Just watching the video has been more than enough. Thanks so much. Bye for now.